neighborhood can be served with gravity draining to North Redwood. In this south corner of the property, there's a sort of a little glade down there that is below the grade of much of the rest of the site. That'll need a small pump station to get up to the rest of the elevation. And there would be some fill needed to get that sort of consistent gravity fed across the neighborhood. In terms of stormwater, you have some really good public works standards for how to treat stormwater. In this case, you're going to want to treat stormwater before it gets into Willow Creek. There are 5 basins on the site. There's actually almost 12 acres on the west edge of the site that can drain into the stormwater pipe that's under North Redwood. There's enough capacity there that you can use that. So that can serve those people. The other basins would have treatment facilities that are outlined in blue. And those would look, those wouldn't look engineered and mechanical. They can feel natural. There are standards in your code to encourage that. So they feel like they're sort of part of that natural area. And that helps to treat the quantity and the quality of the stormwater before it goes into the creek. So just to wrap up, I mentioned the criteria up front, and we've gone through those criteria and noted how we believe that the development plan meets those criteria in terms of integrating with the existing city fabric. You've got those really good connections. We're using street standards that encourage walkability with sidewalks and bike lanes. We're integrating all the parcels, so we're providing an equitable development pattern and opportunities for all the property owners. And then, as Brian will mention, we're distributing the funding and the economic impacts equitably. And we're understanding that some people will have different timing with their development. Some people might be ready to go right now. Some people, well, after annexation. Some people may wait a little longer. And I think I mentioned a lot of these points. So I will proceed and ask Brian to come up and talk about his points.
Any questions at the very end?
Yeah, and we'll take questions for the whole team.
All right. Well, thanks for having us. I'm going to talk very briefly about the funding plan for North Redwood. And I'll actually start with quote, other infrastructure. Most of the infrastructure that you see on the site that Ken has been talking about, roads, the sewer, water infrastructure in those roads, will be paid for by developers or property owners as they build out the site. So that's not really of concern to the city in terms of the city's finances. It is, of course, something we take into account as we're doing the plan and trying to make development costs reasonable. But as we look at most of these roads in here and the sewer and water that would be in them, that would be a developer cost or a property owner cost. And we do recognize, as Ken said, and as Matt will talk a little bit more about, some of those roads could change a bit in terms of their alignment. They could move a little north, south, east, west, as long as they're meeting the intent of the plan. And I can talk more about those if people are interested. The kind of big funding issue here is the parks, because here you have a major piece of public infrastructure, if you consider park infrastructure, that where its presence falls disproportionately on some people's property and not on others. And our solution here is pretty straightforward. The city's current policy is that developments going forward and developers either pay for local parks through a systems development charges or dedication of land. And so what we're proposing here is that just to take an example, if a property were to be over here and to be developed, that individual doesn't have parks land, so they would pay SDCs as they go forward and develop. By contrast, a property here with a lot of parkland would be compensated for the parkland that they're dedicating. So this property owner would have an appraisal and have the amount of parkland that's undeveloped appraised, and then they would count that value against the credit, against the SDCs that they owed. So if the SDCs are here, they have a credit for 2/3 of that. They pay 1/3 in SDCs. It's certainly possible that that in some of the cases where there's a significant amount of parkland and less developable land, they could have more credits than SDCs owed, in which case the city would capture some of the money, the SDCs over here, and transfer it to the property to the east. That's the basic mechanism. Matt will talk a little bit about the density transfer, which is also to some degree involved in that. Yeah.
All right, thanks for having me too. So I'm going to talk about zoning, essentially, and comprehensive plan amendments. So I think, as Ken mentioned and Brian mentioned, one of the goals here is to provide a certain amount of flexibility in terms of how future development occurs. This is a concept plan. We're not trying to nail down exactly where everything lands on the properties, but it's important to be consistent at the same time with the concept plan. So one of the areas of consistency is zoning. As Ken noted, the future zoning will be consistent with the comprehensive plan designations. If someone proposes something different, that will require an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And as Ken mentioned, there are a number of elements of the comprehensive plan that are really important to be consistent with, adhere to as things move forward. So connections to North Redwood from the area, really kind of minimize cul-de-sacs, so you've got a lot of connectivity, particularly for people walking and biking in the area, that you have that loop road that accesses the Willow Creek natural area and park, and that other streets intersect with that. That you have at least one additional north-south street in the area, again, to provide that connectivity. Where possible, roads or streets should be located to be kind of on either side of parcel lines, so you're spreading the cost of the road over multiple property owners. The North Teakwood extension's pretty key to development of the portion of the study area to the east of Willow Creek. We've got some standards that are essentially existing city standards for the length of blocks, and that if you have a block longer than a certain amount, that you have a pedestrian connection in there, and that's the connection that Ken pointed out is to help meet that as well. Again, Ken talked about the alleys, and he talked about kind of the importance of the park and open space along Willow Creek. So those are the things that are important to essentially adhere to as development moves forward in the area. But there are some things that can be flexible. You know, some of those road alignments may change as long as you're meeting those essential pieces. They don't have to be exactly where we've shown them on the map. As Ken said, ultimately the design of trails in the park or the park facility will occur at the time that those are designed, and there's some flexibility there, as well as in variations of the block size. We showed some specific potential areas for some stormwater detention basins, but those may shift too. The city has standards for how stormwater is treated on site within developments, so as long as somebody's meeting that, there may be less or more need for some of those detention basins. So that can vary. The way we're proposing to sort of implement this from a development code perspective, couple of things. One, I'll talk about this sort of in a minute, but we're talking about allowing a certain amount of density transfer between those open space or constrained areas to the developable portions of a property. And I'm going to show you a graphic and talk more about that in a moment. And there's really not a lot of need for changes to the code, because most of what we're talking about in this plan is already consistent with what your code allows. Your code already has lot size averaging and alternative lot layout provisions that allow for some flexibility in lot sizes within other areas of the city, including this area. But what we are proposing to do is create a plan district within your code, so all of that's kind of in one place. The things that I talked about as essential elements, those are identified as approval criteria for future developments in this area. It's clear in this plan district what you can do in terms of the transfer of density and the lot size averaging and alternative lot layouts. So that's all proposed to be both in a plan district specific to this area, as well as a couple of tweaks where those things are mentioned in your code elsewhere. So I've got a graphic here just to kind of talk about this issue of the density transfer, because we had some comments and discussion about this at the Planning Commission meeting, and I think one of the email that came in related to this. So first, you've got kind of the table on the right that identifies which parcels have portions of the Willow Creek area going through them and how much of the parcel is covered by that. So you see some pretty big numbers there in a couple cases, 35%, 45%. And that's really, again, a goal of ours has been to try to equitably distribute both costs and benefits of development amongst the different property owners here. And that's really the reason for proposing that transfer of density. It also figures into the funding calculation. It actually means the city, by allowing a little more, some smaller lots on some specific parcels, you're paying less in those SDC credits in that case. So it's kind of helps out from a financing point of view. I will note that, if I get this right, there's sort of, while we're allowing for smaller lots, as the city already does in those provisions, there's kind of a limited number, which can still be important for a property owner, but you're not going to see a huge number of existing lots in these areas, given just kind of the size and location of where the developable portions of these properties are. So you're going to see the potential for some additional lots in some of these places, but it's not going to be a huge change, but it's going to be enough, I think, to really, again, just help distribute these costs more equitably amongst the different property owners within this area. So I just wanted to point that out. And it does not increase density sort of overall for the entire area. There's no change in the overall density. It simply allows for transferring some density from the constrained areas into the developable areas, but not an overall increase in density for the entire area. So I think that's it for me and us. And now I'll be happy to answer questions. Yeah. I'm going to get up when Ken comes back, because he'll probably have to answer most of the questions, but I'll come back.
Thanks.
Mayor, what's the process? Are we in a public hearing at this
No,
point?
we're still in the staff report piece, and now it's questions of staff and report it all before I open up the public hearing piece. So, questions at all? Yes, sir.
I'll direct this at Matilda, and then you can pass it off to whoever you want. How did the plan come up with the allocation of density? You've got this, what appears to be a real small area at the bottom there for high density, and larger lots, presumably bigger, more expensive houses. It looks like this. What I fear is that someone could criticize this, is that this is a concept plan for rich people, that these are going to be $300,000, $400,000 houses, and you've got only 26 units that are going to be multifamily. Did this come out of previous planning, or how did we,
How to get the zoning that
Yeah.
allowed for the type of development? That's from our comprehensive plan. So when this property would be annexed, normally property will be annexed and take on the zoning of the comprehensive plan. That's where the zoning is. That's the allocation of low density, medium density, high density. And that,
so only this one little part at the bottom?
that's what
Yeah.
was there.
It was-
We didn't change anything.
So-
That's exactly, we took what we already have zoned in the comprehensive plan and went with that, because that's also the same analysis that was done for the transportation system plan. So all that analysis was based on the comprehensive plan zoning as well.
That's-
And it came out of your sort of future growth and housing needs analysis process a number of years ago, identified how much of different types of housing was needed in the city, throughout the city.
Right.
And there was actually some upzoning in this area in the high density and the medium density to get to this. So all of it kind of flowed
Yeah,
back.
we didn't change anything. It's what we already have.
Thank you.
Yes, Counselor.
So to increase high-density residential in this North Redwoods, I keep wanting to say Northwoods, it's a different place. North Redwood plan, it would require
Another comprehensive
a
plan
comprehensive
amendment.
plan
If-
change
And somebody
or rezone.
could do that. Somebody in the future may say, hey, we'd like to come in, and then there'd have to be an analysis, a reanalysis of the need for that.
And when was the housing needs study done?
Probably in a week and a half.
No, the one that you were
Oh,
spoken.
that one, 1999 is when, and then 2003 was when it was rezoned. We did an update and a rezoning to say what properties, where do we need more high density, and we're doing that right now, but
So this plan's based on a report that's 12 years old.
from 2003.
Thank you.
And the development, though, of the build-out of this, though, was also analyzed as part of the 2010 Transportation System Plan. So we've done incremental reviews all along the way. We just haven't done a complete revision of that buildable lands. We're in the middle of that right now, actually.
So you're doing another study.
Yeah,
This
you
gets
have to look at it.
And we have to make an adjustment to this before the plan,
We
before
may,
those properties get to
we may or
annex?
may not, based on what I'm finding, is that it will be unlikely that we'll need to do much rezoning, because we've already had quite a bit of stuff in the urban growth boundary, not particularly in the city limits, but in the urban growth boundary, which is what you do base your growth analysis on. So we could be very limited what's in the city limits for types of zoning and for housing types, but in the broader picture of the entire urban growth boundary, we have quite a bit of land available and zoned appropriately for types of residential. So we feel a bind right now because it's not annexed. So until the market moves property and people begin annexing, we're still going to feel like we have a constrained housing stock here.
Did you have a question? No?
I had a
You have one?
couple
Yeah.
easy ones. So Matilda, the city's give, so to speak, in this is accepting the wetlands as park. And we'll own that park space. That'll be city property. Okay. And for Rick, do you have any particular heartburn over us assuming that kind of property?
No, I actually think it will be a pretty good fit with the expansive plan we have over the Willamette River and the land that we already own.
Little Creek.
And Willow Creek, which extends to the Willamette River. So I think it'll be a wonderful walkway, pedestrian walkway, over a long period of time. Because of the nature of the wetlands, it's not going to require the same level of maintenance that would be required of a park that had to be trimmed and tailored for appropriate uses. One of the things we will need to do is address vegetation, because we want to make sure we use natural vegetation that's that is native to the area, so that'll be a cost, but I'm not anticipating that'd be so severe that it wouldn't be a significant improvement and new resource to the community.
Very good, thank you. Matilda, what does our plan and/or code in that LDR space there to the east of the creek, what's the minimum lot sizes?
They're all the low-density residential, 7,000 to 10,000 is our zoning for
So no
low-density.
smaller than 7, then?
We have provisions in our code for alternative lot layouts and for reducing them to, in a subdivision, down to 5,000 square feet. We have that in our code now.
So,
We're not proposing that for this. We're just proposing, what size did we go 5,000 for R1?
Yeah.
So we're going with what is already there. We're just putting it in the district plan. I'm kind of responsible for making this confusing, I think, because as a planner, Brian and I harp about this all the time. But when we have a master plan, we have to chase our code all over the place to figure out like somebody creates the plan, then he comes in and tries to interpret the plan, and then we're searching all over our code to figure out, okay, what can they do here? So we said, let's take our plan and make it very explicit and make a district that has all the key elements in one place. So somebody can come in the future when there's a development, open the thing up and go, oh, okay, we don't have to go through 20 chapters of our code to figure out what's allowed here. We call it out. The only thing that's slightly different is the density transfer is we allow the parkland to be considered in part of that developable, part of the park to be allowed as a density transfer. We're not increasing density. We're just saying you can cluster it over here to recoup some of the fact that some of these properties are severely impacted by the steep slopes and the park dedication.
Right, they are, and I know that's been some of the neighborhood comment concern. I was looking for that minimal number with density
yeah.
transfer. It could be as low as 5,000.
Yeah, but then there's so much constraint, especially on the east side. There's only so much land, so even so you get to add maybe an extra house over there. It's not going to be a lot because there isn't a lot of land to transfer to.
And it's steeply sloping.
And the steep
Right.
slope. So it sounds like it's more like a shell game where the density's not increased. It's just moved around on the lot.
I understand that.
So it's not, we don't think, when we looked at the numbers of the potential extra house over here, that it's not going to be a whole lot. So you're not going to see something that looks like intense R2 development in the low density. It just won't work out like that because of the nature of how these are situated.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Mayor.
Yeah. Any more questions? Okay. Well, at that point, we're going to open up the public hearing for some testimony. So we'll open it up here. And anything else from the applicant at this point? No? You guys good? Okay. So I have no yellow cards or anybody that's necessarily say anything proponent-wise, unless there's based on the presentation. Now, so gentlemen, you want to bring those cards up, please? Ethan Manuel, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councilors. My name is Ethan Manuel. I live at 1612 North Redwood Street, which is in approximately the middle of this concept plan. And really, my primary goal here is to speak in support of the plan. It's been a long time coming as we went through here. It's been over a year of, fairly active public interaction. I'd like to commend city staff as well as the consultants on a great job on the plan. I think it's well thought out. I think it provides a very nice construct for development in the Canby community, staying true to the small town that we have here, but still allows landowners to participate in development. We have, since this was identified as having some unique characteristics, unique challenges, the overlay on this has essentially taken this plot of land and made it not able to participate in annexation and those sorts of things. So other owners who haven't been in one of these sorts of areas have been able to annex over the last 10 years and do what they want with the land, and this has really been constrained by not having a master plan or a concept plan. So I think this is an important step in that. I think it's a good step. And frankly, I would encourage the city to finish up the other concept plans areas in the city that are constraining as well. The only other thing I wanted to bring up was just to suggest to the city that the road that you see on the east there, which was originally designed to be a connector and would come across a bridge, as you heard. But because of cost-prohibitive nature of the bridge, it is now a single road to a cul-de-sac. And as it's currently constructed, it's going to require serial development. So the first piece has to develop, and then the next piece, and so forth, to get access down to the bottom. I would love to see, or would encourage the city to take a leadership role in that space and maybe sponsor some sort of a district there where the road could get put in with the support of landowners, obviously, and then the cost recouped for that by the landowners as they develop. So I know there's provisions to do that. So I would like to see the city take on a leadership role there. It's hard for any one property owner to put in a road of that magnitude and wait for a cost to be recouped. It's just a difficult financial burden. So other than that, we'd encourage you to approve the plan. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Alan Manuel.
Alan Manuel, 31150 South Needy Road. Mr. Mayor, Council, I was slow to give you my card because I had my notes in the back of it, but I transferred them, so now we are good to go. Resident here of Canby, business and resident in and around Canby since 1969. I've been working on this very project since 1991, which I think is about 24 years ago. I've been actively on this since 2000, pushing to get this done. I'm pleased to see it come to the last meeting. After the council meeting, I went back and on my fingers added up, and I think I have been to 50 meetings on this subject. Neighborhood meetings, council meetings, technical meetings, property owners meetings, on and on and on. And obviously, I am here to support the concept. I think it's been put together in an impressive fashion by a wide number of people participating in it. And I am long ago to the point where we need a plan. It doesn't matter to me what you adopt, but if we have a plan, we can move ahead. And I would like to comment about the high density. I know we have to go with the zoning we have. The HDR is mine. The next 2.5 acres is mine too. So if you want to have 5 acres of HDR, there's a good opportunity right there. I know you can't do that, but you might see a request for that in the future. Affordable housing is a real challenge in this community because of the cost of lots and the constraint on getting new lots. With lots starting maybe at 125 or something, you're not going to build a $250,000 house. That is a very worthy concern of whether this project is looking like a rich man's project, an extension of Willow Creek or whatever. We need balanced housing in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Last call for any proponents. Seeing none. Opponents. Mr. Webb.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. First of all, I put in as an opponent when there's only a portion of the plan I want to talk about. As the plan as a whole, I'm very much for it, and I think that I was on the stakeholders committee throughout the process, and I think that the city's done a good job along with the consultants in developing the plan. However, I'd like to address a unique portion about this project, different than anything else in the city that's presently or possibly in the future, and that is this large dedication of parks and what they call open space or natural area. And the concern we have here is, excuse me, is that while the master plan is being considered, this large of a park dedication along Willow Creek, all the wetlands adjoining the creek and the steep areas that are difficult to develop, when looking at the plan on paper, it all looks great. But when you get down into the meat of things, there's nothing in the plan at all to fund any of the plans for the parks or the trails or the bridge or any of that infrastructure. And if there's not funding there for that, I've lived in Canby for 14 years, And I know what happens when parks are dedicated. They rarely, if ever, get built. They rarely, if ever, get maintained. The city is, during our stakeholder meetings, et cetera, I've touched upon it numerous times about maintenance of parks and bringing in new parks. The city staff has indicated you do not have funds to maintain any, let alone build new parks. So our problem with all this is, without that plan in place, in my view, this master plan is not complete. That the city needs to put in place a funding program of some kind, whether it be by a grant, a city improvement district, something to pay for all this and have it in place before the master plan is complete. Because if it's not, and people start annexing and building and dedicating this land to the parks, it'll just sit there like the Willow Creek open area now, Willow Creek Park. And I don't know if any of you have been down there in that area, but you can't walk through it anymore. Most of the open water, if you look at aerial shots that go back to 2005 even, and the aerials showed a lot of open water in that area. Now it's completely covered. Can't even see it anymore. And I really think this would be a hazard area for the city to own. If a child got down in here and walked through here, you could lose a child in there. I've walked through the area down there and been walking along and went up to my chest in a hole in these areas through the wetlands and the creek. And I just think the city, if you don't put a development plan or something within the development plan, the master plan, to fund all this walkway, the parks, and the bridge, then I think the city is just going to have a mess on their hands, and a very unattractive area, because it'll never get developed otherwise. And I think if the city doesn't put the plan in place, then they should leave all this, let the property owners and developers pay SDCs, use your SDCs to develop the parks that you already have in place, leave the wetlands and everything to the property owners to either put it into common grounds for the subdivisions, or leave it as part of the lot configuration, and let the private parties maintain it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Webb.
And I don't disagree with those comments.
I don't either.
I think that they're right on point. The underlying question is whether we can maintain after we acquire, and whether the maintenance cost associated with a fully improved park is greater than, equal to, or less than a park left in a natural condition. And it's a good question. It's one for which we don't have an answer yet.
Yeah, to your point there, Rick, that is, I mean, it's a bigger, we see that throughout our park system here, and what does adding more parks mean, and how do we maintain that? Matilda, you want to speak to anything regarding that piece?
Well, I actually have a lot of thoughts about that. I think there's a big gorilla in the room, which is, how are we going to take care of all of our parks, and how are we going to provide parks for the community in the future? And I think that's something that's going to be an issue that the council is probably going to have to be working on with Rick, and to figure out how we're going to ever do that to provide parks in the future. As far as actually getting funds to construct a walkway, that's really a simple thing for us to do, and we don't really have problems getting money to actually construct something. It's just a matter of how do we figure out what level of maintenance is, and what we usually do with that.
That's your point, right?
And that's, but we would have funds and grants and things. That's how we do all of our park stuff, is to go out and we look at what funds are available. I think that it's a pretty big issue about the future, but we would always take a park and do a master plan for it anyway, to figure out the costs, and it all comes out what the neighbors will do, like the configuration of this, the walkways and the connections. We like to do that to include the communities when it is annexed, and we put people that are going to be actually living there, and they come to the park meetings, and we say, okay, this is what we're thinking, and make sure we get amenities that the actual people that are going to be living there want there. So do they want that little pocket park to have X, Y, or Z? It's kind of difficult right now to do that because the stuff is outside the city, and so it's more a matter of sort of like when it comes into the city, we'll be dealing with it. And hopefully by that time, we'll have figured out a maintenance issue. Now, as property comes in, there's nothing that precludes us in the future of signing a public-private agreement for maintenance. I mean, there's a lot of ways to handle the maintenance issues. It's just that it's too early to do that for this because we don't even know who's going to be there, what type of development's really going to end up being there, and what those people will ask this group. They're maybe being the ones that are going to annex and develop that. And so when that property gets annexed and the city owns it, then we'll go out and put our partnerships together and see what partnerships we have to construct and what partnerships we have to maintain and what that will be. It's just like the cart's a little before the horse to do that. We need to land bank the park so that we set it aside so it's there so we can do something in the future with it. But we have to have the thing in place before we go out and ask for partnerships in order to bring the thing to construction and then maintenance. But the maintenance issue is out there for all parks in the city.
It is.
And I don't think it's an issue we can say we're never providing any more parks for the people than can be, because the parks are very popular. And as you grow, you need to be able to, we have standards and we have park master plans, and we kind of have these standards that say, when we've gone to the community and they say, we expect parks. We expect that the city figure that out. Now, I'm not sure that we can figure that out in this plan because it's a bigger issue that I think the city actually needs to figure out for all of its future parks.
Well, this is atypical in comparison with what we're looking at when we look at our typical parklands, because as a wetlands, much of this is not going to be traversable in your normal traditional sense. And so I don't know how to clearly define what the outcome will be, but when you're looking at slopes of 12 to 20%, people are not going to be walking up and down. It won't be covered with trails. So you'll see the trails around the perimeters. We will, and I absolutely agree, that we will have to find a way to maintain the waterway because that'll be important in our overall drainage plan. But that will have to be a function, probably ultimately, of a stormwater system. Over the long term, honestly.
So I just wanted, just to make sure that we're capturing Mr. Webb's concerns of just the overall maintenance and appearance of dedicated parkland, correct?
Well, maintenance is really the minor issue. The issue up front is we have this master plan with this park and walkway and bridge. That alone, to construct that, was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million to do that. The bridge alone, they estimated up around $250,000.
Okay.
Just for that portion.
Right.
Okay, so how and when is this going to happen? So if all the properties that are developed, if it happens from SDCs, let's say that example. First of all, will the SDCs actually go to that? Where do the SDCs go now that have been paid? I haven't seen new parks.
We have a capital improvement plan, and this would go on the capital improvement plan. And as we get grants, then the SDCs match that grant funding to get it constructed. That's kind of how it works.
Okay, so let's say we use SDC. So because of the way it lays out, there's a good chance that the eastern portion of this may get developed first. West of the creek, but the eastern portion, because it's closer to the creek, the wetlands may be more desirable. So here we have that developed first, and only a third of the SDCs are paid over the next 10 years, 15 or half of the SDCs. The total SDCs, based upon their count right now, would be less than $1 million for the entire project.
You can use SDCs from the entire SDC funds, because from all the city goes into.
So just,
Here we go. You're talking about you have these SDCs and you build parks, but there's parkland that's been dedicated that's still unimproved. So where's this SDC money being used?
Well, we've built several parks, and since I've been here, there've been several parks, like Legacy Park,
I just think it should be in the
Northwoods
master
Park.
plan, how it's to be funded and at what point.
Yeah, that's why we have a
Should be
CIP
funded.
for that.
Not wait till 20 years from now, when it's all done, and then
go
money's
back
been
and fund
spent
it.
somewhere else, and
Nope. Absolutely get it. Because it is a bigger piece, and it is something we as a city have been, one, grappling with and looking at the parkland piece as a whole, holistically. What does that look like? How do we fund it? How do we maintain it? How do we develop it? And I think part of what, to the concept plan of this, it being approved, and what we then look at is how long is this going to take to develop? And we've got a couple of landholders here, but depending on how that all starts to come in will dictate how and when those things get developed. And so that enables us, we don't have a timeline. When do we, so is that something that we do and we look at?
This isn't driving annexation. This is just helping people, so this isn't in the way of their being able to apply for annexation.
Got it.
Because it's a prerequisite for going out to annexation. It's just helping them. They'd have to do this thing. They'd have to have a concept plan with infrastructure like this themselves
Right.
in order prior to going to annexation. So this is a requirement. But we aren't requiring them to annex. That's up to the property owners.
Right, so
when they want to annex.
this could be a slow
Yes,
for
and-
example, back in November, we annexed the, down off of 13th, so, but it's annexed in, it depends on how orchestrated everybody gets on
That's right.
on those pieces.
It
so.
takes a while. It depends on, not everybody agrees. That's why it's difficult to even get a plan going, because not everybody agrees on how the plan.
Mr. Mayor and Council, this area is atypical of anything else in Canby.
It is.
It's not the pocket subdivision with 50 lots, and they can set aside a little area in the middle of it, and all they have to do is mow it once in a while, and they'll have to worry about it. This area in here will deteriorate extremely fast if it's not maintained properly and improved. The creek has changed tremendously in the last 10 years.
Okay.
And we've lived there 12. And it's not even the same place anymore that it used to be. The creek is filling in. There's invasive species that are overwhelming the creek bed now on the lower third of it. You cannot traverse any of the area anymore on the lower third of this entire project here.
Yeah.
Without a machete and a pair of waders.
Sure.
So, I think the city needs to address this and send this back to the planning commission and put something in place to fund this park plan. And that's what I'd like to see.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Matilda. Matter of process here, so we have, you've written these. I know I haven't closed it because there's another proponent piece here in front of us tonight. Does that need to be read in? Is that counted?
The email?
The email piece.
Oh, it's
already-
it's physically here.
Right, okay. I just didn't know how to address that piece. Okay, thank you. All right, so I'll close the public hearing at this point. Do we have any questions, comments at all?
I just wanted Councilor Dale to double-check my math on this. That we figured out that for a town, for a house that's $350,000, $400,000, brings into the city each year about $800 in property taxes that accrue to the city. The percentage of the general fund that goes to park maintenance is 4 to 5%. Per household, that's about $45 or $50 a month. So one of the things that we do get by development, increasing the value of our property, is that, and not being in an urban renewal district, that this money comes in every year. So that each house that is built is contributing to the park maintenance fund. It's not like we are bringing in a new park without new houses. Each new house in the range of $350,000 to $400,000 is paying $50. And the numbers were too fast and too small for me, but was it roughly about 300 houses, maybe 300 to 400? Okay, so you're not going to buy a full-time employee for $20,000, but it's more than zero that you get by having development in terms of revenue coming in to fund our Parks Department if we use the same distribution formula that we currently use.
Right. And it's per year. Per year.
What did I say?
Per month. It's a good fantastic.
Oh, it would have sounded so much
cool.
better if it was.
I'm spending it already.
Any other questions, staff or any of the witnesses here this evening? No? Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate that. And we'll come up here, findings and conclusions here in a little bit. Thank you. We're moving to resolutions and ordinances.
The first item you have is Resolution 1226. This is adopting the Oregon Department of Transportation's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise DBE program policy and goals.
Yes, and I will address this as part of a requirement to qualify for federal funding in our transit program. We must have a DBE policy and program in place. This is something that we have not, to this point, completed. We did consider the possibility of creating a DBE plan specifically for the city of Canby, but the cost is really quite prohibitive in doing that. We recognize, however, that the services that our transit program accesses are typically driven from the greater Portland metro region, and that the state of Oregon DBE model would be a consistent application and would allow us to meet our DBE policy requirement it would allow us to meet our DBE policy requirement if we in fact adopt the state of Oregon DBE policy and abide by that. The target is 8% DBE. It does not mean you have to actually have disadvantaged business entities representing 8% of the business that you do. However, it does require that you follow a particular solicitation and participation process. It is not an exclusive process, it's an inclusive process. And it is not a targeted process, it's an open process. However, staff recommendation is that you approve the resolution as presented to you, which will allow us to be compliant with federal regulation and to continue to receive federal funding.
Thank you, sir. Questions?
Yeah, can you define disadvantaged business enterprise? How are these businesses disadvantaged?
The old term is women and minority business enterprises. It's expanded to a little bit from that, but there's a formal qualification process, and you have to be identified, be identified, and recognized as a DBE business in order to be on the list, and so that's typically women, minorities, and other groups that meet very specific criteria.
And then actually apply for it.
And then actually apply for it and are granted it.
And our goal is to use 8% of DBEs in our...
Well, that's the target, and our goal is to, when we solicit for services that require the inclusion of disadvantaged business enterprises, that we follow certain specific criteria in our advertising model, but there are no bonus points granted to someone for being a DBE. We just have an affirmative responsibility to make sure that we have reached out to and provided an opportunity for those businesses to participate in our solicitations.
Yeah, you can't require it because you may not get the response.
That's right.
Yeah.
So typically, federal funds come with federal string. So the federal string is just the criteria that we have to.
This is the federal string, and absent an approved DBE plan, we would not be eligible for future federal funds.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay,
Great.
thanks.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Okay, motion, please.
I move to adopt Resolution 1226, a resolution adopting the Oregon Department of Transportation's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, Policy and Goals.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Motion made by Councilor Height and seconded by Councilor Rocha to approve Resolution 1226, adopting the Oregon Department of Transportation's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, DBE, Program, Policy and Goals. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That carries 6-0.
The next item we have is Ordinance 1422. This is adopting the North Redwood Development Concept Plan and amending Canby's Comprehensive Plan and Title 16 of the Canby Municipal Code.
Thank you, Kim. So we just heard all that. And any other questions or comments on the topic at hand?
Just have one for Joe, perhaps. That's right. Addressing the concerns we had earlier, is it even within the legislative purview of this action, the comprehensive plan, to address the maintenance?
No, the problem with it, and Matilda actually mentioned it in a couple of different ways, but maybe I can highlight the idea that annexation is up to the applicants, and so you don't know who's going to annex or when. It is feasible to have, whole sides of that map want to annex and then others not. And so this is a concept, and it's an idea that they then can use as part of their annexation application. But it itself, it's not a contract that then you can attach actual money to, or those sort of promises between parties.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
A question and then a comment. Who at the present time is maintaining that Willow Creek wetlands?
Owners.
The owners do.
Private owners.
And so my comment would be, I would believe that this would increase the chances of maintenance greatly going forward versus, the status quo. Taking the burden off some of the homeowners. And, I think as to the safety issue, I think when the bridge would go in, it would make sense to have some fencing and, certainly having additional eyes on that, working with the citizens around there, I think is going to increase the chances of that is maintained certainly better than it is at the present time.
Yeah, and I would concur that it is absolutely problematic. However, I don't know of a better solution. And this is an important estuary for watershed for us as a community. And it doesn't mean that we should take on the ultimate responsibility for maintaining it, but we do need to recognize that it has considerable value to the community. And if we can find a way to maintain it in its natural state, I think it would be a very nice long-term benefit and ultimately could be something really special. But I absolutely do not disagree with the comments that have been made by the gentleman.
Thank you all.
And I see and I agree that this is a challenge that we'll have to take on, like holistically, the bigger picture, parks, et cetera, down the road. But I certainly don't see it as a deal breaker to this concept plan. I think it's well thought out. Thank you very much, city staff and the team. I attended many of these meetings myself, and I knew nothing on day one, but I feel very well versed thanks to you and your ability to educate us. And so, yeah, a solution will be found, but I'm certainly in support of this.
Great.
Yeah.
Any other comments, questions at all? Okay. Motion, please. Don't all jump at once.
Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance 1422, adopting the North Redwood Development Concept Plan and amending the Canby's Comprehensive Plan and Title 16 of the Canby Municipal Code.
And I second that.
Motion made by Counselor Hensley, second by Counselor Parker to approve ordinance 1422, adopting the North Redwood Development Concept Plan and amending Canby's Comprehensive Plan and Title 16 of the Canby Municipal Code. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carries 6-0.
The next item we have is ordinance 1423. This is before you for second reading. It's amending Canby's comprehensive plan, land use and zoning map from heavy industrial H1 and M2 to high-density residential HDR and R2, respectively, for an approximate 7.6-acre portion of tax lots 2101 and 4900 of tax map 31E 34C as adjusted by LLA 15-04 at 235 South Sequoia Parkway.
That's a mouthful. Thank you, Kim. So yes, we had our last meeting. This was a public hearing piece about the zone change. Is there any other comments or staff comments at all on this?
Not tonight.
Okay. So this is a roll call vote piece. So take a motion, please.
I move that we adopt ordinance 1423, amending Canby's comprehensive plan, land use map, and zoning map from heavy industrial to high-density residential, respectively, for an approximate 7.6-acre portion of tax lots 2101 and 4900 of tax map 31E34C as adjusted by LLA 1504 at 235 South Sequoia Parkway.
Great.
Second that.
Motion's been made by Councillor Height, second by Councillor Coleman, to approve ordinance 1423, amending Canby's comprehensive plan, land use map, and zoning map from heavy industrial, HI and M2, to high-density residential, HDR and R-2, respectively, for an approximate 7-acre portion of tax lots 2101 and 4900 of tax map 31E34C, as adjusted by LLA 15-04 at 235 South Sequoia Parkway. That was a roll call vote.
Counselor Rocha?
No.
Counselor Parker?
Yes.
Counselor Hensley?
No.
Counselor Dale?
Nay.
Counselor Height?
Yes.
Counselor Coleman?
Yes.
And Mayor Hudson.
I am a yes. So that motion carries 4-3. Great, thank you, Kim. New business this evening. First up is item A, findings, conclusion, and order CPA 15-01, ZC 15-01, LLA 15-04. And who's tackling that one for us this evening?
Do we have Brian here?
Brian Brown, you're up. We have the whole planning team here tonight, huh?
We always follow up with a written rendition of what your decision was, and that's what the findings do. And it has the same information in it that the ordinance has, plus also gives what we really call findings, and that's in the section. It's got all the code criteria that are outlined in here. And then there's a section in conclusion that basically says why you made your decision. For instance, you believed that the statewide planning goals 2, 9, and 12 in particular had been satisfied. Going back to the criteria and putting that in writing, that it met the comprehensive plan and the criteria that we're supposed to utilize when we approve comprehensive plan amendments and rezonings, and that all the conditions of the lot line adjustment will be met, and that you recognize that that lot line adjustment its implementation is necessary to set the exact boundary of the parcel that's to be rezoned for the apartment use. Right now, you basically have seen the 7.6 acre conceptual area. It's with the actual lot line adjustment survey that gets recorded at the courthouse that will set that. It might be 7.601 acres or something because of that. And that's about it.
Thank you, sir. Comments or questions on the findings report there?
Just a quick question for Brian.
Yes, sir.
So we'll expect down the road a change in the TSP for the lighted intersection?
Yes.
Okay.
That was one of the conditions listed in here, and so we'll need to follow up on that. Another TSP amendment with the North Redwood plan, and we need a TSP amendment with this as well.
Kind of bundle them all together.
Hopefully
One
we
big
can do
swath
that.
of changes all at one time. Okay. Thank you both very much. Appreciate the hard work on these things. Great. Anything else, Brian?
Nope.
All right, sir. Next item of new business is there's been a request from the Bike and Pedestrian Committee.
We need to adopt it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You have to adopt those findings.
I'm just ready to just keep going. I'm sorry.
On a roll.
I will back it up a minute.
Motion.
I'll take a motion.
Just got it open.
I can't make motions, folks.
I think I'm making a motion. I would make a motion to adopt the findings and conclusion in order. CPA 1501/ZC 15-0, LLA 1504.
Second that.
Okay, motion's been made by Councilor Height and seconded by Councilor Coleman to adopt the findings and conclusions in order CPA 15-01/ZC 15-01 /LLA 15-04. All those in favor?
Question.
So,
I was going to say, real quick.